Mr. Speaker, what on earth is going on in our parliamentary democracy? What on earth is going on in our so-called parliamentary democracy? How can we possibly get to the state that we now have more parliamentarians in these Houses of Parliament appointed by a Prime Minister than elected by the people? In what sort of parallel political universe can it continue to be a good thing where we continue to increase the membership of an unelected House while simultaneously at the same time seek to reduce the number of directly elected members of Parliament? And have you had a look at that place down the corridor? Have you had a cursory glance at the membership of that place? It is an absolute and utter undemocratic disgrace, an antiquated, absurd chamber stuffed full of cronies, donors, placemen, former MPs and failed members of Parliament. There are... It's early in proceedings, but yes, why not?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way, but come on, he talks about has he heard and has he seen the way that place operates? Has he heard any of the debates? Has he heard debates from distinguished lawyers, from distinguished surgeons, from distinguished architects, from people, some of whom have more expertise than in this place?
I want to go in to forensically look at the membership of the House of Lords, and I really hope that the honourable gentleman listens carefully about the type of people we've assembled in that place, because they are undemocratic horrors. There are now 812 members of the House of Lords, making it the second largest legislature anywhere in the world, bar the People's Congress of China. Now, yes, I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
Does the honourable gentleman not agree with me that we should reduce the size of the House of Lords? And we could do that very simply. We could get rid of 21 of the 26 bishops, we could get rid of 92 hereditary peers, and we could have a mandatory retirement age after 20 years, so not actually based on age, but based on length of service, so a mandatory retirement after 20 years. That would easily take care of 212 plus peers, and we would have a smaller House of Lords than we do House of Commons.
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, and I recognise his interest in this issue, that's a start. That's how I would describe that, because I think there is much more that needs to be done to address some of the anomalies of that political circus down the corridor. Now, I'll take the honourable gentleman's point, and I think he's right. There are people who serve in there, the technocrats, the great and the good, the people who are appointed by the Independent Lords Appointment Commission, but they are an absolute tiny minority. And this is the image of itself that the House of Lords tries to project. We invite the great and good in to help us with their legislation. But the real reality of the situation is the overwhelming majority of the membership of that House is appointed by a Prime Minister from lists supplied from the party leaders of the UK parties. And that is why we therefore find the cronies, the placemen, the donors and those that are failed or former MPs. Yes, we'll give it to the honourable gentleman.
I thank the honourable gentleman, and I find myself somewhat discombobulated in agreeing with some of his sentiments. Do I infer from his comments that should hypothetically in the future the other place take a decision with which he agrees but sets its own face against the Salisbury Convention and a commitment enunciated in our party's manifesto in government, that he would not support the Lords and would reiterate and recapitulate his view that they're unelected and lack democratic accountability and authority?
Well, I would support Attila the Hun, Genghis Khan and their many hordes if it helped defeat this government. That's what I would do. So I have no issue and problem in supporting the House of Lords when they get something right. That doesn't actually make them any better when it comes to these issues. And I can actually sense the pain in the last few months from so many Conservative backbenchers who have looked at this place and who have got increasingly upset that they've defied its will. This is a government that doesn't particularly like to be challenged, and to be being challenged by unelected, undemocratic House, I think is something that's beginning to disturb the Conservative Party. So join us, is what I say, in dealing with this undemocratic disgrace.
The honourable gentleman allowed?
Yes, of course.
I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman. I agree that we should be doing something very quickly about the House of Lords, but I know the honourable gentleman's an intelligent character, so maybe he can help me out with some maths here. The current Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister wants to cut the numbers here from 650 to 600 to save £12 million, but has stuffed the other place, which is costing £34 million. That to me sounds like a cost and not a saving.
The honourable gentleman is spot on, and it's actually worse than that. The last figures that we've got is for 2014-15, where the cost of the House of Lords was something approaching £100 million. That is what we're actually spending it at. And instead of addressing that and reducing it, this government's sole intention and ambition when it comes to the House of Lords is to continue to increase that place down there. And I think when we're going about appointees, we only have to have a cursory glance at our latest batch of new parliamentarians, the 16 new appointees from the Prime Minister's resignation list. A resignation list that was simply oozing and dripping with patronage and cronyism. Because we now have 60 new, shiny new parliamentarians that we could welcome to these Houses of Parliament. But have a look at these 16 new parliamentarians. 13 of them are Conservative. Well, let me tell you exactly what they're like before you say that. 5 of them were former senior members of staff in the former Prime Minister's office. Wow. 1 was a former special advisor to the Prime Minister. 1 was a special advisor to the former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. 1 is the Conservative Treasurer, who just so happened to have given the Conservative Party millions and millions of pounds over the course of the years. And quite curiously, this is the one that gets me, one of the new members of the House of Lords is the former leader of the Conservative Remain campaign, who I'm suggesting isn't getting a peerage for any great success that he's delivered to the Conservative Party. But if the appointees... Of course, to give it to them.
I rise simply to correct the honourable gentleman. The Conservative leader of the Remain campaign is a she, not a he. If he professes to be an expert on appointments to that chamber, it would at least be appropriate for him to recognise that it achieves gender balance, as well as many other virtues.
There are many things that you could define as redeeming features, and that is one that I might just about accept. So I thank the honourable gentleman for pointing that out. So what we have, therefore, Great Britain, your new parliamentarians, strangers to the ballot box, but very good friends of the former Prime Minister. I'll give it to the honourable gentleman.
I'm just following the honourable gentleman's points on gender balance. Could I just help the honourable member by saying that for the hereditary peers, there are currently 91 men and 1 woman.
Blame the genitor. I do disagree with the honourable gentleman's estimate. I believe that the new creations are just exactly the savvy sort of people that we should have in the House of Lords. However, the reason we are in this position of an unreformed House of Lords is because there was insufficient consensus in this place with which to replace it. Is the honourable gentleman going to set out his plan for the other place?
If that sounds like anything, Mr. Speaker, it's a manifesto to get himself a good place in the House of Lords down the corridor. And I wish him all the best in that ambition. And I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for mentioning the hereditaries, because that brings me on to my next point. Because where the appointees are bad enough, there are some other cracking, undemocratic horror skulking the corridors down the road. And that comes to the aristocrats, the 91 members of Parliament, people who have an opportunity to design, fashion, shape and issue and supervise our laws because of birthright, because for some reason they are the first son of a family that won a decisive battle in the Middle Ages. But the one thing I do like about the hereditaries is that they bring an element of democracy to the House of Lords. Did you know that? It is these surreal and bizarre contests that they have when one of their number dies and the Earls it counts, the Barons of Lords, the ladies of the land get together to replenish its number. It is the weirdest electorate in the world, the poshest electorate, the most exclusive electorate you'll find anywhere. But at least that's an element of democracy in the House of Lords.
On that point, I think one of the poshest electors was a group of 3 Liberal life peers who chose one of their number. But on that point of bringing democracy to the Lords, wouldn't a small improvement perhaps be a ballot of the life peers? So at least we had some natural way of getting rid of some of them and perhaps inject some democracy into their veins, despite them not liking it.
But I'll say to the honourable gentleman, it's only landlocked Lesotho that has elders as a feature of its democracy. It's the mother of all parliaments, for goodness sake. And we still have people who are here because of birthright. It is an absurd and... I think I've given way to the honourable gentleman before, but I saw the other one. Will I give... Right, there you go. I'll give way to the...
Once again, I'm afraid I'm going to have to correct the honourable gentleman on a point of fact. This is not the mother of all parliaments. The original phrase, the mother of parliaments, refers to this country, not to this institution, and the mother of all is a prefix associated, of course, with the Iraq War. If the honourable gentleman is going to pack so many factual errors into his speech, how can we possibly take him seriously as a constitutional or any other sort of authority? He was a marvellous player and lyricist for Runrig, but I'm afraid as a constitutional theoretician, he sadly falls short.
The honourable gentleman, on quite a positive note, all I can say to him is I'm very grateful to the fact that we have him here to correct that. But I always thought he had an issue with experts. But there we go. He's a self-proclaimed one himself. So we'll let him get away with that just now.
On that point, Mr. Speaker, perhaps I could help my honourable friend here. The Department of Economics at Oxford has actually done a breakdown of how much the average cost for each peer is for getting into the House of Lords. It's very interesting reading. 100,000 for Conservatives, 140 for Labour, and 99,000 if you want to become a Lib Dem member of the House of Lords, on average.
Well, again, that's probably very average estimate figures, but I want to come to the costs of members of the House of Lords, and I want to deal with it. And I'll let the honourable gentleman intervene once again. So there we have it. There's the aristocratic membership of the House of Lords. But just to make it even more surreal, and I think somebody mentioned it already, there are 26 places reserved for bishops in their cassocks, but not just any ordinary bishops in their cassocks. They have to be Church of England bishops in their cassocks. Again, this legislature is the only legislature in the world that has a place reserved for clerics other than the Islamic Republic of Iran. But do you know the coup de grace, the ultimate horror of the membership of the House of Lords, and it's not the aristocrats and it's not the bishops. We still have 104 Liberal Democrats. roundly rejected by the electorate. They are kept alive in that crypt down there on a political life support system. The people of Britain, welcome to your legislators. We have aristocrats, we have bishops, and we have unelected Liberal Democrats. Isn't that a great contribution? I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
To the honourable member for giving way. And if he is serious about reducing the size of the House of Lords, as indeed my honourable colleague mentioned a moment ago, has he thought of a system whereby we have indirect elections based on the number of votes cast in the general election, with each party having an electoral college with maybe a ceiling of 500 peers as an interim measure, which would obviously suit his party, and it would remove this absolute outrage of having 101 Lib Dem peers in the House of Lords?
I think that's a reasonable suggestion for the honourable gentleman, but I'm not going to suggest anyway how we actually conclusively deal with it. All I'm saying to the House today is we have to deal with it. We can't be in the situation just now where we're continuing to increase the numbers of the House of Lords while decreasing the numbers in this place. So, I mean, I would respect any suggestion that came forward as long as it deals seriously with this, because we cannot go on. I'm going to make a bit of progress. I'll come back to the honourable gentleman if that's all right. Because in describing this place, and all its undemocratic horrors, we still have the audacity to lecture the developing world about the quality of their democracies. We have the gall to tick them off about corruption, about patronage and cronyism, when we have a chamber filled down there, which is appointed by a Prime Minister. How dare we suggest that to the developing world when we have such an absurd, chaotic system down there? And that brings me to this point, and I think it's something that's quite important. Because it's a stranger to democracy, because it's in the hands of a small elite and it's a appointed, created parliament, it's always going to be this temptation to delve into the outer edges of corruptibility. And it has to be said that when you look at the membership of some of these appointees, the only qualifying characteristic and feature that they seem to have a place in a legislature is the ability to give large amounts of money to one of the main UK parties. That seems to be their only qualifying feature that they have. Now, this was tested to the absolute limit by my honourable friend, the member for Inyear, when he brought forward the cash for honours question, one of the biggest political scandals of the past decades, where we saw the issue of a sitting Prime Minister being questioned by the police and some of his key members of staff and fundraisers actually elected. That is what we've done. We have made a chamber that is immensely corruptible, and I think that we should take that on board when we look forward, going forward. Yes, of course, I'll give it to him.
I'm very grateful to him, and I intend to vote for his motion this evening, because I agree with much of what he's saying. Would he agree? He said that money was the only qualification. Would he not accept that one of the other qualifications that appears to be gaining ground is to have been rejected by the electorate as one of the qualifications? And actually, tackling the point made by my friend for Lichfield, I was always a big supporter of the House of Lords because it was full of people who were the most eminent people in society. Now it's becoming full of second-raters and people who have been rejected by the electorate. And perhaps that's why the Lib Dems aren't represented in this debate. Maybe they're embarrassed about their representatives down in the other place.
Well, they should be thoroughly embarrassed about their membership down there, because it's the only thing that sustained them as a political force. Yes, it's the last time I give it away, because I have to make some progress. So I'll give way to the gentleman.
I'm going to vote with him tonight, and I think it's a good motion, but I'm not certain where this is going to lead. When he talks about reduction, wouldn't the best way to be to abolish it? And I had the privilege in a previous Parliament of doing that. So we start from zero, and we have some sort of federal. Is he going to outline a plan that he would like to replace the House of Lords?
Yeah, well, I'm going to suggest to the honourable gentleman certain things that we could look at for replacing, because he's absolutely right. I think there's no way that we can now continue to reform this place. It's unreformable. There is nothing we could do with this place. It's just got out of control. It's like a huge, undemocratic leviathan cloaked in ermine, which we continue to feed with patronage and cronyism. There is nothing we can do about it. There is very little redeemable features that we have in the House of Lords. Give way to the honourable gentleman.
It's rare I also find myself, Mr Speaker, agreeing with the honourable gentleman entirely, and indeed the honourable gentleman opposite on this matter. But isn't the real issue here for constituents and our democracy that it's not just the absurdity of the House of Lords, it is the boundary review that sees the number of seats per here being reduced, it's using an out-of-date register where we're seeing people being disenfranchised, it's a political system that doesn't represent our nations and regions properly in our constitution today, and indeed a government that has taken away the powers of civil society to criticise it. It's a package of things here damaging our democracy.
I thoroughly agree with the honourable gentleman, and I'm grateful for his support. I will come on to the reduction in numbers of members of Parliament in this House, because it's important, and I thought it was important to link the issues where we're growing an unelected House while shrinking the representatives of the people. I think it's right that these are linked, because that is what is concurrently going on. So he makes a very good point. But can I make a bit of progress, if that's all right? I've been very generous to give away. I'll try and give way later, because I want to speak about one of the other major features of the House of Lords: the deference. All the forelock tugging to all these lords and ladies, this idea of the high and mighty, this political culture that we still have in the 21st century of deference, of somehow know your place and respect your betters to these people in ermine. Imagine designing a chamber where this is still a feature of how we conduct our parliamentary debates. I actually looked for the House of Lords TV channel the other day, and I came across the fantasy adventure Game of Thrones instead. And I was listening to some of the language that was being used about all this, and it struck me that the House of Lords is so like the Game of Thrones without the draggings, beheadings and the proper bending of the knee. That is how ridiculous that institution is down the road. So let's start with one of the first things that we should do. We have to get rid of all this 13th century medieval deference and create a modern 21st century establishment, and ensure that we get proper representation in this country in the second chamber. Yes, of course.
Thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. And does he agree with me that there are countries around the world that we can look to learn from? Countries such as Australia, who, ironically enough, have chambers that are based on this House, but have managed to leap ahead and have elected chambers, and actually in the Queensland Parliament have abolished their upper chamber, and now it is in fact a tourist attraction. Does he agree with me that if we do not make progress, we are going to fall behind in the world in terms of global democratic process?
Well, absolutely. My honourable friend makes a very good point. And I'd love to see that place as a tourist attraction. We could stuff some of them full so they could see what they were like. You know, they're all dressed like demented Santa Clauses. It would be fantastic. Maybe a winter Christmas fantasy or something we could have as a feature of a visitor attraction. I mean, this is where we are, and I'm grateful to my honourable friend for making that point. So what's this government's intention when it comes to the House of Lords? Well, there only seems to be one ambition, and that's to stuff it full with even more cronies and donors. You know, we've seen this latest additions now. I don't know if the government's intention, perhaps the Minister could clarify for this, but I get the impression that what it's trying to do and secure and achieve is to get a government majority in the House of Lords. It's unhappy with these defeats that they've experienced at the hands of the House of Lords in the course of the past few months. But I think that would involve, I'm not that my son's properly this, but I'm suspecting that that would still involve another 30 to 50 new members of the House of Lords, which will take its membership up to 900, which then makes it very close to overtaking the People's Congress of China. Is this what the government really intend to do? And at the same time, and it's the point the honourable gentleman makes, it seeks to reduce the elected members of this House. This House, this nation, should be appalled at that prospect. It should be something that it will be demanding be addressed in reverse. How on earth can we, as a chamber, agree to the idea of stuffing that place even more full while reducing the representatives of the people, us, the directly elected members of Parliament?
To the honourable gentleman, listening very carefully to what he has to say, I quite like his motion as it happens. It certainly has the virtue of being better than the previous one we debated. He's hit on exactly the point, which is the oversized nature of the House of Lords. That's a serious point. Would you agree with me that there's nothing more X than an ex-expert in the context of the diminution in the expertise that appointees to the House of Lords are able to bring? And would he agree with me, furthermore, that one way of dealing with that lack of contemporaneous nature of the knowledge and understanding that the Lords bring is to limit their term of office? So you could create, as a short-term measure, something called a term peer, which would reduce the numbers and make sure that those in the House of Lords are actually contemporary.
There's very little about that I can't agree with and think is a very good suggestion. This is the reason that we brought this to the House today, and it was to invite contributions from members such as that. Because I think I'm beginning to sense, I know lots of Conservative members won't support our motion this evening, but what I'm beginning to sense, and I'm actually taking this as a positive, is this desire to address this. And I think we should work together as a House to address this. I think we first of all have to accept that we've got something drastically wrong with the creation of a second chamber. I think we just have to acknowledge that this isn't working, and it's starting to embarrass us. I mean, we're starting to see, I know in the past Conservative members say it's never an issue for them, like why touch something that the public aren't concerned about. I'm beginning to sense a turnaround in that sentiment. And I think we've seen a number of national newspapers who have taken this up as a campaigning issue to have this addressed. And I think more and more, certainly I've seen this in my mailbag, that people are concerned about the quality of our democracy. If we allow a political circus like that to stand, we diminish our own role as the nation's representatives. We are allowing this to continue as a feature of our democracy, which we really should be tackling it. And I encourage honourable members, maybe if they're not going to support this tonight, to look seriously about how we start to address this. I was in the House when we had a look at this, and I voted for all the proposals that came forward about replacing the House of Lords to a majority of elected members. That's now going back about 10 years, and I know there was a failed attempt to have a look at this with the coalition government last time. I think it's incumbent, and I'm glad the Leader of the House has now joined us, that the Leader of the House comes forward with solid proposals about how we address this now, because we have to do it. We cannot let this stand, and I think this has to be addressed. Now, I, along with all my honourable friends on these benches today, as well as the honourable member from Edinburgh South has left us, we got our new boundaries today, and we follow in the tradition of honourable members, so we know our new constituencies. It's the government's intention to reduce the number of Scottish members of Parliament from 59 to 53. 6 members of Parliament will be lost in the government's proposals to reduce the boundaries from 650 to 600. But I also had a little look too, just to see how many Scottish Lords there actually were. And I actually found 61 who have registered addresses in Scotland. And that comes before the aristocrats and the landed gentry who have lands and estates in my country. So I'm sort of wondering, we're at the stage now in Scotland where numbers of members of Parliament have been cut from 72 when I was first elected, going down to 53, where we now have more Scottish peers than there are Scottish members of Parliament. I will go away.
Would my honourable friend also agree that perhaps the starkest illustration of how bad things have become is that if the United Kingdom, with what's left of it at the time, tries to get back into the European Union at any point, they'd be disqualified from membership, because countries that were under Stalinist dictatorships 25, 30 years ago are more democratic than the United Kingdom is.
And I'm grateful to Honourable for that point, which I will let stand on its own merits. Now, the government are saying that it's reducing the membership and the numbers of this House to save money. And of course, if you reduce members of Parliament from 650 to 600, savings will be made. Of course, that's going to happen, and it's a natural consequence of spending less. I think I've given way to both Honourable Gentlemen. I'll just try and make a bit of progress. If I've got time, I'll come back to the Honourable Gentleman later. So we're now in the situation where we are reducing this number to save money. But at no point does it actually have a look at the costs of what's going on down the corridor. Because I think I said in response to the Honourable Gentleman at the back that the cost of the House of Lords is now a cool £100 million. That's the operating cost for a year. Members of the House of Lords get £300 just for turning up. They actually get £150 for working from home. This is what happens, and these are tax-free allowances that they get. The cost, and I think that the member might want to figure wrong, because my figure here is that the cost of the £100 million, it works out about £100,000 per peer in the House of Lords. And for the same cost as this 800 part-time peers, we could actually have 300 democratically elected and accountable peers on an MP salary. That's what we would get in response for that. Yes, give way to Honourable Gentleman.
Just on the point he's making, two of my constituents, Lord Forsyth of Drumlane and Lord Robertson of Port Ellen, sit along in the House of Lords. Lord Forsyth cost £46,346 last year, and Lord Robertson £19,708. I myself was on the front page of a local paper because of how much it costs for me to come down here and do my job and employ staff. I wonder when newspapers will print this kind of information about how much our Lords are costing us.
Hear, hear. And that brings me on to my next point about this, and it's an important point the Honourable Gentleman makes, and that is value for money. We know how hard we work in this place. We have constituents that we have to represent and make sure that their interests are brought to this House. They've got none of that at all. There's some of them barely turn up. Some of them have barely been in for a debate and made any parliamentary contributions at all. But yet we're prepared to have this huge expense to sustain this place where members of Parliament who come down here and work hard for their constituents day in, day out are being cut. And there's another couple of things I want to say about the reduction in the numbers of members of Parliament. We're in the process, or the government's in the process of taking us out of the European Union. And what's going to happen, therefore, when 73 members of the European Parliament who have significant powers are no longer there? We will be expected to take up that work. So what's going to fall on a smaller number of a group of members of Parliament is an increased workload when there are no longer members of the European Parliament working for us in Brussels and in Strasbourg. And where does government, of course, intend to reduce the number of members of Parliament? There are absolutely no plans whatsoever to reduce the size of government. And what we've seen with the government is not any attempt to reduce the size of government in Whitehall. They're actually make sure that there's more departments, there are more special advisers, more civil servants. So if there's going to be any reduction in the number in this place, surely there should be a similar reduction in the number of people who serve in this government. Give it the Honourable Gentleman.
Thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way. He's making a very interesting point, because if and when Britain withdraws from Europe, we have no Euro MPs. That increases the workload. The change in the boundaries will increase the workload in addition to that as well.
Absolutely, and we know that the more and more work will be put. And we've got a bigger increase in population in this country. And I still don't know the case, and I know, well, I think I know the case why the government are reducing the number of MPs. I think it was an attempt to stuff the Labour Party. Can I say they don't need any favours and help and assistance to do that? They seem to be doing that pretty well on their own. I'll give it the Honourable Gentleman.
Giving way. I think he's very unfair on that point. I think the number was reduced because in 2010, when this policy came forward, there was a great deal of public feeling that MPs had become too expensive, and it was a response to the national mood then.
You know, of course there's a national mood to cut. If you were to ask any member of the public, and I'm sure when I go back to my constituency at the weekend, if I asked them, would you like to see the size of Parliament and government reduced, they would say yes, of course. But my point, and I think the Honourable Gentleman might respect this, is the fact that we seem to be doing it to elected members, but we're letting that place grow exponentially. And that is the key issue and the key point when it comes to these sort of things. And I'm beginning to get the sense that the public are beginning to have a look at what we've got down the corridor and decided they're going to have to do this. So enough is enough, Mr Speaker. Surely, I mean, I'm looking at...
I'm very grateful, gentleman. He mentioned earlier there's 61 peers from Scotland and the number of MPs are going down. Isn't that just more grist for the mill and another reason why people will this time, within 2 years of the triggering of Article 50, be voting for independence and the second referendum come at 2 years afterwards?
My good friend, the Honourable Member.
Order. The honourable gentleman has been generous to a fault in giving way, and I think that's appreciated by the House. Can I just very gently make the point that 11 backbench members wish to contribute, and I would be, or the Chair would be, looking to call the front-bench wind-ups at approximately 6:40, so there will have to be a very tight time limit on backbench contributions, a fact of which I know the honourable gentleman will wish to take account in the continuation and conclusion of his eloquent contribution. Mr. Pete Wishart.
Was, as you say, Mr. Speaker, commit to my peroration when it comes to this particular contribution, and I have been as generous as possible when it comes to intervention. So I will just conclude by saying enough is enough. Surely now is the time to address this. We have to look at what we're doing with the House of Lords. Now, I am immensely proud of my party that we failed to take places in the House of Lords, but that's something that we have, and it's to take places, and I appeal to the Labour Party, no more. Don't take any more places in the House of Lords. Because I'll end with this. 3 things have to happen almost immediately. No more new Lords. A moratorium, an appointment of House of Lords. We have to see plans from the Leader of the House to bring forward about how we start to reduce significantly its membership with a view to abolishing that place in the future. Mr. Speaker, the House of Lords is a national embarrassment. It's something that should shame the country. It needs to be reformed. It needs to be looked at. Let's make this nation proud of something we could call a second chamber that we can look at that represents this country. Start to look at how we address this place. No more cronies and airmen. Let's have a democratic chamber.